Let's talk about the choice in Gears 5 and what it means for Gears 6. You know the choice I'm talking about, saving Del or saving JD. Gears of War is in a funny place right now. Not haha funny, but more sad funny. Once upon a time, Gears of War rivaled Microsoft's flagship, Halo. But much like Halo, Gears is a shadow of its former self. Gears 5 nearly killed the franchise with some questionable decisions and choices. The Gears of War fanbase and community was split. But today, we're going to talk about the choice at the end of the game. What may be canon, what both choices could mean, and what each choice does for the franchise as a whole. The big decision is saving JD or saving Del. Whatever choice you make doesn't make much of a difference for the ending of Gears 5. The only differences are Marcus's reaction to the news and who's in the cutscenes at the end. The choice needs to be considered strongly for the future of the franchise. I conducted a little survey throughout the last few weeks. I asked everyone I played with in multiplayer what their choice was. Most people did not answer, but I did get a few responses. So I took to the internet to ask more people. After 206 replies, 187 people said they saved JD and 19 saved Del. That's just over 9%. I know 200 people is not a gigantic sample size, but a lot of the people I asked over Xbox Live also said they didn't bother finishing the campaign. With that being the case, I figured they didn't really even know the choice. I still think this is a good representation of who saved whom. Most people want to save JD. We played as JD in Gears 4, so we feel stronger about saving him. He's a phoenix. 3 games of playing as Marcus will make you care about his son. Look, personally, I saved JD because I just couldn't do that to Marcus. He has lost everything, and everyone. He lost his mother, he lost his best friend, then Dom, his other best friend, then his father, and eventually Anya. Not to mention the hundreds of Gears that were his friends that died presumably during the Locust War and the conflict with the UIR. I just could not do that to him. The odds just felt stacked up against Del in my opinion. I believe Del was grouped with Kate for most of Gears 5, just so we could get attached to him. It felt odd being paired with Del, really. To make the choice difficult at the end of the game, it just didn't feel organic. One of the worst moments in the campaign is when JD says he hasn't been acting like himself lately. That's just such a poor excuse for writing. They want us to struggle to make the decision at the end of the game, so let's have JD act out of character. I get his arm is all burnt up and he feels guilty about Lizzie's death, but he decides to what? Become a dick?
Look, I haven't exactly been myself, Del. I know that.
So who showed up today?
Your friend.
That still doesn't feel like enough to kill him off in my opinion. But if you do decide to kill JD by saving Del, the cutscenes get a little darker, at least in terms of Marcus suffering the loss of his son.
Thanks for the save. Hey, where's James? What?
As for saving Del, that means Marcus could easily become the protagonist of the next Gears game. Now he's got almost no one left to lose, and he's getting old. He needs to see the fight through to his last breath. This would solve a problem people had with changing the protagonist to being Kate. However, they could still decide to keep Kate as the protagonist. I mean, talk about darkest timeline really. The end of the game is basically Marcus and Kate agreeing that now they have to hunt down the swarm and kill Kate's mom, the new queen. If they go with JD being saved, because most people seem to save JD, and to be fair, they should go with what most players choose. I did my own independent survey, but they probably have the raw data of how many people chose to save who. Anyway, if they save JD, this is how it affects Gear 6. The protagonist goes back to being JD. Marcus passing the mantle once and for all, if Gears does decide to continue as a franchise, and I mean, it's a huge franchise, how can it not? If it can be salvageable anyway. The new Delta squad would be JD, Kate, Marcus, and Foss. I can see them not putting Marcus in Delta, bringing in a new gear. Since Del was the smartest one of the young generation, we could have someone like Hannah from High Busters, Cole's daughter, join Delta squad. She's smart, she could fill that role in the team. Or maybe we could see someone like McAllister join Delta, but I doubt he would leave Keegan and Lonnie. Ultimately, I think we would see a full new gen of Gears as Delta Squad as they take the fight to the Swarm. But let's talk about the future of Gears now. It seems the Coalition noticed that people prefer the Horde over the Swarm, and they began to move back into the Locust being the main antagonists, the threat that everyone wants to fight, instead of the Swarm. I think this is a good push to bring back the enemy people prefer. It's a bit weak to backtrack on your main bad guys, but the Swarm just wasn't cutting it like the Locust were. Ultimately, to not completely undo their own story, they should just incorporate the Locust into the Swarm. All the variety of enemies we could have, maybe we could have encounters where it's randomly generated what enemies we fight. Not necessarily for every fight, but it does increase replayability. It skyrockets the possibilities of who you're fighting and what encounter is what, like Horde. Only true story beats should have specific enemies, like Brumox and boss fights. As for which character you save, they could also take the route where neither choice matters. We could end up playing as Kate again, with Marcus, and that's it. Along with a new Jack or Cole, since they love to put Cole in everything. I don't know if this is the worst case scenario or not, but they made us make a choice between Del and JD. And you don't see what happens to the body of who dies. Kate's mom was dead in Gears 4, and she came back for Gears 5. I think a giant part of Gears 6 could be maybe Kate and Marcus take the fight to the Swarm, and find that whoever you didn't choose to save has been revived by the way Kate's mom was. And now they have to sever their link to the Swarm. If this game is planning to be a part of a trilogy, much like the first 3 years, it has to end the story with a bang. And this leaves the door open for a whole new set of ideas. Granted, it would be once again weak to have a story where the protagonist has plot armor. One character has to have died from Gears 5, and we need to live with the decision. I could totally see JD being dead, and Marcus and Kate and Del go into the Swarm like they were doing with JD in Gears 4. And they find that the Swarm have zombified him like they did with Kate's mom. I mean, there's something special about the Phoenix line apparently in Gears. Or the exact same to Del. We don't know anything about Del's parents besides that they are dead. There could be some lore like Kate's lineage that ties him to the Swarm. Doubtful, since he was born after the Locusts were defeated, but still possible. I mean, Kate is tied to the Locust. The next Gears of War needs to tackle the decision made at the end of Gears 5, and it could be handled similarly to Mass Effect, with choices made on who lives and who dies, but the better option would be to pick a definitive character who suffered the death. It means the choice Kate made had more weight on the character instead of the player, but it would mean the Coalition doesn't have to spend time developing 2 sets of lore interactions based on who lived. That way they can focus on one definitive story. We will most likely still have to wait years to hear anything about Gear 6 in a similar fashion of Halo Infinite. They need to do a lot more restructuring in their storytelling format if they want Gears to continue. Rod Ferguson was the head of the Coalition for Gears 4, 5, and Tactics. But now that he is gone, we might finally be able to go back to the Gears that we all love. I'm not trying to put the blame on one man, I'm certainly not trying to give the credit to another one. But the direction Gears was going was not working. Ultimately, the choice of who lives and who dies is up to the Coalition. But as an avid fan of the franchise, I want to see it succeed. Even if it means the character that I picked to survive is dead. It makes a lot of sense having JD die for Marcus to take over back as the primary character. But Marcus is getting old, so it also makes a lot of sense Del dying and Marcus dying possibly in Gear 6 to leave the mantle for JD. I recently played Gears 4 and it felt more in line with what Gears is supposed to be than Gears 5. I think they need to take a step back and go back in the direction of Gears 2 and Gears 3, the golden age of Gears. If all else fails and the next chapter in the Gears saga flops, I would rather see them go back to basics and go back to Marcus and Dom and Barrett and Cole, possibly sometime between Gears 1 and 2 or Gears 2 and 3, Or maybe just go back to the early years of the Locust War. A side game much like how Gears of War Judgment was, but this time without all the extra changes that made people dislike it. Thank you for watching.
You've made your choice, now die with it.